Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have Simon Finnis from McLaren Minerals to present for the webinar. So, brief introduction to McLaren Minerals. They are an Australian mineral exploration and resource development company with a primary focus on heavy mineral sands. Two core assets, one the McLaren Titanium Project in Western Australia. This is a 100% owned project based in the Eucla Basin. The second one is the Barossa Zircon Project, is formerly owned by Eucla, now by McLaren Minerals. It's an exploration project targeting zircon-rich mineral sands, currently with the possibility of rare earth element opportunities. The company recently announced its quarterly activities report, which I'm sure Simon will touch on. So with that, I will let Simon get underway with McLaren Minerals. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Anthony. And look, thanks everyone for joining me. I think we have 20 odd people, 30 odd people joining us. So that's a good turnout. Very happy to talk about McLaren. And look, I'll leap straight into it and we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. The normal disclaimer, everybody, I encourage you to read that in your own time. Okay, so this is where our projects are located. We acquired McLaren in August of 2024. We recently acquired the Barossa Project, although that is still in the process of having the tenements transferred to us. McLaren is in Western Australia. Obviously, you don't need to say anything else other than that's in Western Australia with regards to the mining jurisdiction. Location-wise, it's on a sealed highway. It's 350 kilometres by road to a deep water port. It's a very simple ore body. It's a sulfate ilmenite dominant ore body, and it's very large with a recently released resource of 529 million tonnes. So it's a big ore body. PFS recently completed and we've launched into the Bankable Feasibility Study. Barossa is a different sort of mineral sands project, even though it's on the Eucla Basin, it's on the other side. A completely different mineral suite, about 60% ilmenite, but 16% zircon and some monazite. So we're very happy to add that into the portfolio. And I guess the strategy there is that we have a dominant ilmenite project. Once we get that off the ground, we'll start moving forward with Barossa aggressively like we always have. And in the fullness of time, we'll have a nice broad product suite to offer people in the mineral sand space. And the other thing notable about McLaren is our management team. A bit embarrassing talking about yourself, but we've got a fantastic board and a fantastic team reporting to me, developing McLaren. There's a bit more about us, about 500 million shares on issue. This slide's a bit old. Share price currently running about 1.3, 1.4 cents. So valuation has increased from there, which is good to see. That's obviously the cheapest mining stock you'll see with a 503 million tonne resource anywhere. And look, that's the team. You've got Michael Arnett, who's the chairman, mining experience coming out of his ears and has chaired NRW for a number of years. Peter Secker, who I first met at Mount Lyell in about the mid-90s, but his first job was in mineral sands and a very experienced mining operator. And my role really is to develop projects. That's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. And we just want to keep building projects, and we'll build this one with a little bit of luck. So this is a bit about McLaren. It is, as I said, it's a magnificently large resource, 500 million tonnes plus. And look, that is really limited by the drilling, not limited by the resource, in my view. For the PFS, we put together a mining inventory of 186 million tonnes at 5.85%. That's about 35% of the resource. So you don't have to do too much maths to work out that this is downplaying the project in a significant way. That PFS suggested producing 400,000 tonnes per annum of ilmenite concentrate with a significant 35% margin, NPV8 of 8% discount rate, 252 million, 26% internal rate of return. and revenue over the life of that mine, about 15 years, was 2.6 billion, and cash flow out of the site around about $55 million per annum. So if you think about that project, you've paid your debt back after 3.7 years, then you've got 12 years running at $50 million cash a year in, year out. And of course, there's a heap of upside. So we really like this project. Clearly a difficult place in the market right now, and we haven't seen the value yet reflected in the share price, although things are starting to turn around. But we certainly think this is a great project, very low risk technically, in a great state and in a very good location. Significant global JORC resource. We've proven through the PFS that we can manage the slimes, and we've identified a very high-grade lens in that northern part of the ore body. Some of those results are listed there, and we've had more announced this year, and we'll see that across the ore body, that we'll find a bit more material below where the old resource ended, because basically the previous operators just didn't drill deep enough. So we finished the drilling for this year. The main reason for that drilling was to increase confidence in that indicated area and produce what we're hoping is a significant measured resource, which can then be converted into an ore reserve. We're just seeing consistent mineralisation from surface, not thick mineralisation, not thick, obviously. And we've still got a number of assays that are still to be delivered. So we're working through that process, and that is just showing exactly what we thought we'd see at McLaren. Spend a little bit of time on Barossa, and as I said, I'm happy to answer questions about McLaren, about anything else at the end of the presentation. This is located in South Australia. It's 90 k's north of a deepwater port of Thevenard. It's about 100 k's east of a project called Jacinth-Ambrosia, which is a tier 1 zircon mine run by Eucla, and they use Thevenard as their port. So we've got a proven logistics system. We've got identified prospects on site already. A certain number of drilling has been done, and there's a heap of prospectivity here at Barossa. So we're very happy to add this into our portfolio. Very big land position. And as this slide shows, what we've identified here is a structural thaw, we call it thaw line, and an envelope of greater than 1% HM that runs about 50 k's north-south. So a bunch of high grades there. But again, what we're interested to see here is what we can develop from scale. Eucla have already delineated Mojave, Kalahari, and Gobi. They're already significant prospects in their own right, but we would hope to generate many more hits on this project. And from a status perspective, a site inspection has been scheduled for this month. So we would hope, by the regulator, we would hope that soon after that, those tenements will be transferred to us and we can start doing some work. We've already done a lot of planning. So that's where we are in the world and what we're doing over the next little while. McLaren, obviously, in Bankable Feasibility Study, unfortunately, by definition, they're generally fairly boring, although we will be producing lots of drilling results over the next few months, and we'll be doing some metallurgical work, and we've started our environmental, and we've done some hydrological work. None of that is groundbreaking. None of that sort of makes people excited. However, we are very keen to do all that work because you need to do that before you get into business. So after the drilling results are in, we'll update the mineral resource estimate. We will work on our ore reserve, and we will put together a mining plan. And from there, and after the test work, we'll move into the engineering and other activities. Towards the end of the year, we'll start moving into the tendering for the operational contracts, obviously haulage, mining, infrastructure. There's some serious work to be done. And while all that's going on, we'll do some nice work. Barossa, we would hope to drill there this year, and from that, we would hope to validate some old results, and also come out with an exploration target. So we're very keen to progress both of our projects. We think there's lots of news flow to come over the next 12 months, and we believe this company is really severely undervalued. Just regarding titanium feedstock, and I speak about this a fair bit, but our product is a high-value feedstock for smelting, and that is because it is high in titanium and it's high in iron. So it contains about 96% iron plus TiO2. So when you put that into a smelter, you basically have no waste. And the feedstock of the chloride slag that comes out of the bottom of the smelter goes into the chloride pigment process. And then they have little waste because that is an 85 to 90% TiO2 product. And the pig iron that comes out of the top of the smelter goes into the steelmaking process. So it's a very good way to generate pigment, and it is a very low waste process. And the countries that have cheap energy, so a high advantage with regards to energy cost, will take advantage of this. The Middle East, although it's in turmoil right now, have sort of several large smelters, and they're building more. Northern part of China and Southeast Asia also building furnaces so they can process ilmenite. So from the point of view of our company, we have McLaren. We're very excited to push that forward, but we did want to add that second project to give us that product suite. We are focused on mineral sands. Mineral sands is not well understood, but it is vital for everyday life. Pigment goes in paints, papers, plastics, any coatings, welding rods. There's a number of different things that people don't understand that TiO2 is in. It grows year on year about 3.5%. So it's just one of those products that keeps on keeping on. Great team, fantastic project at McLaren that could be bigger than we think. Barossa, not scratched the surface yet, and we've got exposure to titanium and zircon and potentially rare earths, Barossa. And that's just some detail on a resource. So look, I will leave it there, and I'm happy to answer questions. I'll stop sharing, so my head will suddenly get bigger. But look, Anthony, I'm happy to answer questions from yourself or anyone else.
Great. Thank you, Simon. It's a good update. Yeah, we have some questions for you. First one I have is kind of about Barossa, and it's just asking why do you think Eucla sold it to you, or what is the public answer to why Eucla would have sold it?
Look, I just think they had a lot on their plate, to be honest
Okay.
with you. They had a lot of different
Yeah.
assets that they are pushing forward, particularly in Victoria with Wimmera and with Balranald.
Yeah.
And look, like everybody else, they've got a certain amount of capital and they've got a certain amount of bandwidth to develop projects. And there were a number of projects that they didn't see themselves getting to. And I'm guessing, but that would be my interpretation. And look, smaller companies for some of these, often they think they're smaller projects, but smaller companies do them very well because we've got lower overhead. We can move much more quickly. So look, I think it's in good hands, and they've retained some upside with regards to a royalty and the first right on finished products, which we actually think is positive for us as well, because when you come to finance these things, having someone there and a major backer, that could be quite important.
Yeah. Yeah. And a related question to that is from the floor is with Eucla having slowed down its synthetic rutile operations, does this benefit ilmenite producers like you guys?
Look, short answer is yes, but there's lots of different reasons why the synthetic rutile process has been curtailed in WA, and some of those are that there's just not much suitable ilmenite to go into that process anymore. Southwest of WA had a lot of ilmenite that used to go into those syn rutile kilns down near Bunbury. There's not much of that left anymore, but certainly, and there's certainly not much natural rutile being produced in the world either. So you're right, there is some support for our product, because then the next most valuable product is chloride slag, and that's what you get out of a smelter. So you convert sulfate ilmenite or other ilmenites with high ions into a slag, an ilmenite or a TiO2 slag, and that goes into the chloride pigment process. So in the short answer is yes, but I think there's lots of different reasons behind those curtailments that are yet to be brought to light.
Yeah. And that conveniently moves into another question, which is in regards to chloride slag furnaces. It seems like the market in China and the Middle East, or sorry, there's a lot of chloride slag furnaces being built in China and the Middle East. So has the market shifted at all when it comes to chloride slag?
Yeah, look, certainly the world is moving more towards the chloride process away from the sulfate process. Sulfate process is an acid leach, and chloride process is leach using chlorine gas. So it's very easy to explain. However, it's a very difficult technically process, and the chloride slag process or the chloride pigment process has really only started to be taken up in China in the last 5 or 6 years. Really, they were very much sulfate pigment producers for decades. We are seeing lots of different. I'm just going to turn the noise off on my phone because I don't know why it's making noises at me. The pigment, the smelters have come to light. I mean, the one in Saudi Arabia at Jazan was actually built 12 or 13 years ago. And they're just starting now to ramp up properly. So one smelter is running at full capacity. That's a 250,000 tonne a year pigment or TiO2 producer. And they have another one exactly the same size that's now ramping up. So if you're thinking a 50% ilmenite product, you need 500,000 tonnes to fill up each of those smelters. So you need 1 million tonnes of sulfate ilmenite to go into those two smelters. There's another one slightly smaller being built in Oman. And there's several in mainland China, and there's 7 or 8 being built in the northern parts of China, where you see cheap hydro and, of course, high quality Mongolian coal being burnt at very cheap prices to again take advantage of their energy pricing.
Okay, good. As far as the BFS is concerned, do you have any sort of timing on when you think there'll be enough data to go forward with that? And will you be potentially adding more as far as the scope goes when it comes to putting the BFS together?
We're doing some test work now, and that is just to tick a couple of boxes that we thought weren't properly ticked to the PFS with regards to screening, locations of screens, etc., etc. And a part of that was that we hadn't done enough fractionation type test work to know where we should position those screens. Out of that, though, we will get some marketing samples, and we think that's very important because these projects live or die and are financed or not financed by the way of offtake. So certainly that's very important. But BFS itself, obviously, we're waiting for assays now. That rolls into mineral resource update. We have some brackets around some numbers that we have internally that we think where it's going to land. Obviously, we're not going to publicise those because I could be wrong and I'll get in trouble. But we also are looking very carefully at whether or not we slightly change what McLaren looks like. You know, there is a potential to add a dry plant which would produce an ilmenite product, and you know that has several benefits in that you get obviously higher revenue for your finished product, and you haul less material down the road, and you haul no moisture down the road. So there's lots of operating benefits. There's obviously an added capital and added operating costs with regards to labour, some gas, and some electricity. But we sort of think that'll pay off. So we're doing some work around whether that should form part of the Bankable Feasibility Study. Of course, the engineering is the main part of a bankable. So you need to make sure you do the engineering work to a particular standard, probably a Class 3 engineering standard, so that it can be called a Bankable Feasibility Study. We need to employ an independent technical expert for the banks, and we need to do all those sorts of, or jump through all those hoops to make sure that we can technically call it bankable, and that would include obviously some sort of financing package. Look, I saw a question flash up on the screen, Anthony, which I'll just answer about the recent trip to Japan. We've had several discussions with a couple of the traders since that time. They're progressing, but we haven't had any any real traction as yet.
So, but you'd still need to see some MOUs or offtake agreements to sort of be packaged with BFS as far as the funding side of things would go then.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, I think it's they're precursor to funding. You can tell everybody you like how good you think the product is.
Mm.
It doesn't mean anything until you can prove it with pieces of paper.
Yeah,
And the market as it is, and particularly the Asian market, they just love to see samples. So
yeah,
getting these samples packaged up and sent off, and then following that up with a trip, really is the way to get some marketing happening for this project.
yeah, yeah. Um, do you with the quality of your material, does this mean that you can potentially get a premium price for it?
Look, I think we'll get a higher price going the smelting route than you would if you went through a traditional sulfate pigment plant route.
Okay.
And if you do that,
Yeah.
if you go to sulfate ilmenite, you're probably selling it to China, and that's no,
Mm,
that's just the fact of the matter is they don't recover the iron through the sulfate pigment process, so therefore the value of the product is lower.
mm,
So if you can recover two products,
yeah.
then generally the value to the end user is higher, so therefore you can negotiate a better price. And the good thing about McLaren is it's got a meaningful scale. And I
Mm,
mentioned I threw some numbers around about those big smelters in Saudi
yeah.
Arabia. But if you can guarantee 400,000 tons of material a year to one of those guys,
Mm.
that's a serious deal for both sides, which makes sense.
Is there any opportunity for you in if I'm looking at titanium as a metal, given its uses in components, especially in the aerospace and defense industry? So, is there any opportunities for you there, or is that too many steps removed?
Yeah, look, it basically is. Look, traditionally, ilmenite, the ilmenite business is for pigment. So
Yeah.
some of the TiO2 produced would go into making titanium metal, but it's a very small part of the market compared to the pigment portion. And look, we're talking a pretty serious market. It's a $12 billion market a year, so it's a reasonable market. But certainly the metal is a very small part of it. As you say, it's light, it's non-corrosive, so it's very good for shoulder joints and aeroplanes
Mm.
and drones. So it's a fantastic product, but it doesn't really flow on back down to the miners.
Yeah. Okay. So the value doesn't, you don't see much value out of the further away from the mining you get as
Yeah,
far as the aerospace and defense industry goes.
it's hard to imagine, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, One of the questions that's come in from the audience is, was a person missed some of the presentation? And I don't recall, but I don't, did do you have any updates on the eastern shoreline?
We ended up drilling 19 holes into the eastern shoreline. My geologist tells me that he saw things in there that he expected to see, but he did not scream anything from the rooftops. So I guess from my perspective, I'm waiting for assays and I'm waiting to see what that all means. He's putting together a report for me now. The drilling is finished. But if we'd have seen, 20, 30 metres of mineral from surface,
Mhm.
you would have heard about it. We certainly saw some mineral in the drilling, but it's not something you can announce really. And we just
Mhm.
need to see the numbers to see what it actually means. What we do see is that it actually almost joins up in the northern part of the ore body with the McLaren ore body. It
Mhm.
sits a little bit underneath that topographically, but um, look, I'm very keen to see the assays, but at this point in time, I'm hedging my bets.
Sounds good. Probably need to keep some things closer to your chest than others.
Yeah, 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 yeah. We would have loved it for it to be a absolute ball breaker, but at this stage, it doesn't look like that. But it certainly looks like the geological story is correct. We just need to see whether it's economic.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you give a bit of a quick background on how you see the supply demand dynamics shaping up for the next, I guess, for the next 5 to 10 years on the titanium side and the mineral sand side?
Yeah, look, I think I agree with most pundits when I just see that we're actually in quite a soft market conditions right now, but we
Mhm.
are seeing that coming to an end. We are seeing the demand starting to tick up. We're seeing a real shift to the higher grade feedstock, so the chloride pigment
Mhm.
process,
Yeah.
which sort of adds into our story around sulfate ilmenite going into a smelter and producing chloride slag. Um, and we're also seeing obviously a little bit of disruption, obviously with the Middle East war.
Yeah.
But we are also seeing significant growth in certain segments of that market, and we are seeing, or we have seen, a certain amount of sulfate ilmenite and other lower grade ilmenites come out of the market. So we think
Mhm.
the demand is there, and we certainly think the demand will be there when, for the timing around McLaren. But we're right now, we're in a softer part of the market, but it is slightly cyclical, and we're seeing it growing like everybody else, really, for the next decade at 4 or 5% a year.
Mhm. Um, how do you see the supply situation kind of as far as coming into the market for products that would affect both projects?
There's obviously a number of projects in the pipeline coming out of
Mm.
Victoria,
Yeah.
but they are obviously focused on rare earths rather than focused on the mineral sand
Hmm.
element of that business. They're mineral sands projects, but they've been
Hmm.
around a long time, and it's really only the recent valuation of rare earths that have made those projects economic. But there are
Hmm.
4 or 5 very large projects in Victoria that look to bring on um, being on stream in, let's just say, in the next 5 to 10 years.
Hmm.
With regards to Australia, there's us. There's a few behind us or close to us.
Hmm.
There's a big project in WA called Empire, which is huge, and we're all interested to see where that falls out of the development chain. It's
Hmm.
slightly different to a lot of different mineral sands projects in Australia, so we're all looking to understand that a little bit better. As far as the rest of the world goes, there's not a lot coming on. Obviously, there's Grand Cote in Africa, which is still going and will go for a long time, but really, that really is a zircon mine that supplies an ilmenite smelter up in Norway.
Hmm.
The South African business has been winding down for a number of years and will continue to do so. There's a couple of things in Madagascar that could come online, but at this stage don't look like being in the next 4 to 5 years. So, look, it's there's not a lot of new demand coming on right now. Not a lot of new
When
supply coming on right now, I should say.
yeah. When do you think so up from the point you get the BFS done, assuming that everything is exactly as it's supposed to be, how long will it take until McLaren would be online, would you expect?
Um, it's not actually that long. If we
Mhm.
are able to, and we have the financial capability to do some early works
Mhm.
while we're going through those final stages, i.e., waiting for the finance to roll in, then you're probably from financial investment or final investment decision, you're probably 12 months to production. It's a very, very simple plant that will be basically put together, um, or built and constructed overseas, put together somewhere in WA, probably landed in Esperance, put together in WA, and then into modules and delivered
Mhm.
to site. So it's not a very complicated capital build.
Mhm.
So it's once the money's in the bank, it's quite a short construction period.
Mhm. Okay. Assuming the numbers come in for Barossa as you expect, how would you look to prioritize it with McLaren?
Sorry, what do you mean?
So what I mean is the McLaren project's progressing. The numbers come in for Barossa and look good. The economics stack up. How do you see prioritizing, I guess, the funding and
Yeah,
I guess the intellectual capacity to get everything done?
yeah. Well, it's a typical junior mining company. We just expect that we're
Mm,
going to be able to do everything, Anthony. Um, but look, it's logical that we haven't even got a resource at Barossa yet, so that's it's years behind McLaren. So
okay.
one's a pre-development and development phase, and the other one's an exploration to maybe pre-development phase.
Uh-huh.
Um, they are likely to have, well, they're not likely to have, they will have a different market. So
Mm,
again, the funding and off takers are probably slightly different. So
uh-huh.
we're already seeing interest in Barossa, for instance, from third parties. So that's all very positive.
Mhm.
We just think it's another string to our bow. And while you're developing or doing a feasibility study, we think getting a little bit excited about Barossa will be good for the investors.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Questions also come in regarding, I guess, funding on for especially for McLaren. Do you have any thoughts on how you would fund it, or are you looking to? I mean, I guess part of that also is would you be looking to stay a 100% shareholder of the project or owner of the project, or would you bring on a partner?
Look, we're like every junior. I think we're probably open to every discussion.
Hmm.
We certainly see offtake as a major step forward
Hmm.
for financing, and in
Hmm.
fact might be part of the solution for financing. That would be I
Hmm.
guess, our preference. That being sort of a
Hmm.
bookmark. That's what we did at Metro. We signed a bauxite supply agreement, and then we were able to get finance through not through the
Hmm.
traditional banks. The ANZs and the NABs and the Commonwealth banks generally don't finance these sorts of projects. So you're looking at the
Yeah.
second tier or a bit more boutique type banks.
Hmm.
But certainly there's debt available for these sorts of projects because it does generate enough cash flow to repay. So
Hmm.
that's really all they care about. The mineral sands market is an easier market to understand than the bauxite market. So I guess I'm heartened by that there will be a level of understanding amongst some of those banks, and there's certain groups that can provide marketing reports that are uh, understood by the banks. So
Hmm.
we think it's an offtake type led financing, and obviously then you put in place traditional debt, traditional equity.
Yeah. So there is likely once you have a BFS and some offtake agreements, there's still likelihood of an equity raising in the mix somewhere.
Well, you have to. I mean, to get these things off the ground, you obviously have to have money,
Yeah.
and everyone who understands project financing knows that while you have the debt in place, you
Yeah.
have to spend the equity first. So there's always an equity raise, and there's always someone else's money that has to come in before the banks give you theirs. So look, that's just a fact of life, and
Yeah.
everyone understands that. I guess what we're saying is that it's not yet, and it's not imminent, and we're 1.5 cents, and that's a crazy price.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this question is probably a good one to wrap up on. And I swear it's come in from the audience, and it is regarding the potential for broker coverage prior to the MRE coming out. So there is a question from the audience regarding will you plan any broker coverage? And I mean, I have my own thoughts on being able to plan brokerage coverage and not being able to, especially in the way the markets have gone in the last few years. But anyway, I swear that's a question that's come in from the audience.
You know, I believe you, Anthony. Millions wouldn't. Look, we have looked at paid research before, and we'll look at it again. I mean, there's no reason why you wouldn't do it, really, except for the cost and, getting someone up the experience or up the knowledge tree to understand what the outcomes of the business might be. The broker type research would entail basically attracting one of the bigger names, whether it's Argonaut, whether it's Euros, whether it's Canaccord, because the smaller brokers really just don't have the capacity or the money to have a whole list of analysts sitting there writing research. But the bigger names do, and we're obviously out talking to those guys as much as we can. But we need to be bigger. We understand that, and we also need to make sure that people understand what this business is all about. And I think that's one thing that people don't quite understand. They sort of understand that we've got a resource. They understand where it is, and they understand. I hope that there's a team in place that can build it.
Yeah.
But I don't think people are quite grasping what the end game is, which is that this would be a long-term annuity type business at McLaren in particular. That could go on for 30 or 40 years, and that's very attractive.
Yeah.
I saw a couple of questions pop up myself, if that's all right, Anthony. I'll just answer those. One was catalysts, and obviously we've got drilling results coming out probably every couple of weeks from McLaren.
Yeah.
They will drive the business or drive the news flow. As soon as we get hold of Barossa, we'll do some field work there, and then it will become obvious what the timing of the announcements and the work coming out of Barossa will be. We are excited about Barossa. We anticipate the market liking Barossa as well. And from a McLaren perspective, obviously the metallurgical testing and results, and then off-take trips and maybe some pretty pictures from Southeast Asia.
Is there any sort of timing that you can give on having the tenements handed over to you?
The only indication we've got is that they're doing the inspection this month, and that is the precursor. The regulator comes out and inspects, and I presume they're inspecting from an environmental point of view to make sure the rehabilitation has been done properly. We've got no concerns at all about that because it's a Eucla, and a Eucla do the right thing. But it's part of the process, and very soon after that, we'll get the tenements transferred to us, and then we'll dot our I's and cross our T's and have some meetings with the traditional owners and with other stakeholders, and then we'll get into the exploration phase.
Oh, I guess one last question on that: does the Eucla have any I guess royalty payment or anything coming to them assuming the project gets up and running?
There is a royalty as part of the business. Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Part of the deal is a royalty. Yep, that's right. So just similar to McLaren. I think McLaren's 1.5%. I think the Eucla, Eucla's 2%. But it's basically a gross revenue less. So it's an FOB royalty less. So it's less costs.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I think on that note, we'll end, Simon, but thanks for a great update, and looks like you've got some really interesting stuff happening going forward, and quite a lot of news flow that will educate and engage the market and get their share price moving for you.
Well, that's right. I think we've bounced off the bottom, but we've got a long way to go. Thank you, Anthony. Thanks, everybody.
Good. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.